Hello, folks. It's Jerlene, and I'm live on a Thursday in the middle of the day. Today, I'm joined today by a candidate. So give me just a moment. I'm gonna introduce myself, and then didn't keep her backstage. She's already on stage right now, but she gets to hang out with me while I introduce myself. I'm Gerlene Tatum, live from Long Beach, talk of the town. In an effort to give folks an opportunity to learn about different candidates across the city, I've just made myself available to just have dialogue and be in conversation with folks. So I'm actually live with attorney Gerrie Schipske, former city council member, author. I'm actually really, really excited, y'all. I mean, if I just start geeking out, please just geek out with me. Because this right here is actually an absolute honor just to be able to share a screen with attorney Gerrie Schipske. Um, before I jump in, I was just going to go over a couple things. It is election season, people, and there we have less than, I believe, 2 weeks before it is time for before June 7th. So June 7th is the last day you can vote for your candidate of choice. I've been reminding people to check your mail. For those of us who are really bad checking our mail, make sure you check your mail, get your sample ballot, get your mail-in ballot, June 7th. Polls open up on the 28th, and not polls, voting centers, because we moved away from polls I believe the last election cycle. We now have voting centers. Some of these voting centers are not directly in our communities anymore. Before, I used to walk around the corner, go to their polling station at your local fire department. That doesn't exist anymore. Now it's polling center, or it's voting centers. So please check with your neighbors, check with some of your senior neighbors, check with some of your neighbors that do not have transportation. If they prefer to vote in person, help them to get to the polls. And I'll talk about that more again before we in this conversation and in future conversations leading up to June 7th. So again, today I have joining me attorney Gerrie Schipske. She is a candidate for the city attorney's office for the city of Long Beach. So welcome, Gerrie.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Is it okay if I call you Gerrie?
Oh, please.
All of a sudden, I feel like, wait a minute, maybe I'm not being respectful.
No. Everybody calls me Gerrie.
So please just introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about us. I learned yesterday at a candidates forum that you are a West Sider, at least your grandparents were. So please tell us a little bit about who you are before we get this conversation going.
Thank you so much. Yes, I was born in Long Beach, and my parents had met at the Pike. My grandmother was living over in what was called Truman Boyd Manor at the time. And when my parents were married, they were married at St. Lucy's. They had their wedding reception at Silverado Park. And then we lived at what was called Truman Boyd Manor until I was about 4 years old. And my grandmother stayed in the area on Santa Fe Avenue. She was a Gold Star mother. And so she lived there until she died in 1960. And so we were constantly in that neighborhood. And so when I came yesterday to the 7th District Forum, it just brought back some stuff that I hadn't visited in a while. But primarily because my roots come from that. My roots come from a real working class family. My father, again, was in the Marines. He got out of the Marines, and then he became a machinist and worked at that for about 35 years. My mom was a homemaker and raised 3 children. And then she also became a bookkeeper and then worked for the U.S. Marine Corps. So it's important to me. They set that out very early, that service to the community was important, as well as education. And I kid people, my mom kept telling me to go to college, but she didn't tell me when to stop. So that's why I have several degrees, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to do that. And so I served on the Long Beach City Council for 8 years, as you pointed out, over here on the east side. And during that time, one of the priorities of my being on city council was to make the council open and transparent and accountable. And I was very honored. President Obama honored me at the White House as one of 7 champions of change for open government. So that's been my signature, my priority. We need open, transparent, and accountable government. And with this latest thing going on now with the city of Anaheim and the connection, the political consultants in Long Beach, we have got to make anti-corruption a top priority. All the candidates should be talking about this. They should make certain that people send the message that Long Beach is not for sale. And last night, what struck me when many of the community members talked about the ongoing issues on the west side, one of the things I did say to everyone was, that's why you've got to get money out of politics. Because as long as special interests can control what goes on in City Hall, you're not going to see substantial changes. They don't listen to the voters. They listen to who, fills the coffers, both for their office holder accounts now and for their campaign accounts. And so that's what I'm focusing in on this campaign, is, among other things, anti-corruption.
Well, can you tell us, like, so for myself, I mean, over the years, I've been, well, first of all, I remember meeting you when you were
Right.
running for office. And
Right.
actually, I remember the first time I ever actually spoke to you. And it was at a breakfast event at the convention center. And
Oh,
actually, your partner Flo walked up to me. It was after an incident had taken place in Long Beach, and I had somehow gotten myself involved or whatever. And I remember her walking up to me and just giving some very encouraging words to me that day. And I didn't even know who she was, and I didn't even know who you were until that day. And so I remember that. So again, I'm really excited that you're here. And you as a you when you first before you got into this race for city attorney, you were running for the mayoral race, and then
yes.
before the final filing period, you
Right.
removed yourself from that list, got into the city attorney's race. And for me, kind of seeing you over the years and knowing who you were, it made me really excited about this city attorney's race, because prior to that, honestly, I've been trying to remember the last couple persons' names, and I don't remember them yet. So,
Right.
so
You're
now,
not alone. You're not alone.
so
I run into this all the time. People go, "We have an elected city attorney?"
yeah,
Yeah,
so tell people, including myself, like,
sure.
what does it mean to be a city attorney? What is that role? What is that responsibility?
Well, the city attorney, there are only 10 cities, 10 or 11 cities in California that actually elect a city attorney. All the other cities contract with an attorney, just as you and I would do. If we needed an attorney, we would go out and find one. And that's what other cities do. Long Beach decided very early on in its foundings that it wanted a city attorney who could be the sole legal counsel for the mayor, the city council, for all the commissions, committees, and boards, as well as the city manager. That today is what the city attorney does. That person also is the person that defends the city when we are sued, either through claims or major litigation. It's supposed to be a position, I think, that should proactively work with city management on avoiding claims by fixing problems before they become litigation. The city attorney also is supposed to make certain that the elected officials understand the law, the ABCs of good government, and that is the Brown Act, the Open Records Act, Public Records Act, and the Campaign Finance Reform Act, to make sure that they understand what they need to follow. So it's the major advisor, the only advisor to the city of Long Beach concerning legal matters.
So for most processing this, the city attorney is there to protect those that work for the city.
Absolutely.
Yet,
Absolutely.
yet, yet, what I heard you say, you want to ensure that things are fixed so that there aren't claims against the city.
We spend so much money on paying out claims.
Hmm.
And what we don't do is aggressive, proactive risk management that analyzes department by department and says, this is a potential liability. How can we fix this? Do we need to do training? Do we need to do better disciplining? Do we need to do better supervision? The County of Los Angeles has an excellent risk management program, and it does that. And then it publicly lets others know outside what has been done when an incident occurs. And I think that the voters are so desperate to get that information. They want to know that things are going to get better, and that we are not going to have like 30.4 million in police misconduct cases. What was done about those cases? What happened in the department? You don't have to name individuals, but you certainly
Hmm.
can talk about systems and how they need to be improved.
So, how intimately involved is the city attorney currently, or uh, uh, either currently, or should the city attorney be in these departmental type things? Because I mean, because now I'm thinking about right now we got some challenges in our city auditor's office.
Yes.
I'm nervous about what may come out with this whole finance, the fundraising finance piece, a person, how they're
Mhm.
connected to our local electeds.
Right.
um how, or even, I mean, I know you were part of Measure M, which I would love for you to, or the
I was opposed to Measure
litigation,
M.
opposed to Measure M, and the
Right.
litigation
Right.
regarding that, and how could either that been a, like, first of all, I want you to tell us about Measure M, what that means, and what you stood for in that. um but how intimately involved should be, or could be, the city attorney in these different departmental things that end up having to be go to litigation.
I think they should be intimately involved because that person is the legal counsel for the city. It is the person is supposed to keep the city out of trouble. Um, and it's interesting because I raised this during some candidate forums, and the response I got from my opponent was, "Well, we that's not our job, and we need to be." We come up with contracts, but we don't enforce them. And how can you tell? She used the police issue. She said, "Well, how can you tell if someone's going to do something like that again?" Well, I would suggest you might want to look at the Department of Justice's report that came out of the city of Oakland that actually did an analysis of how you can do risk management in police departments. And it's possible on every front to be able to do that. It's kind of like, well, we're there and we're the advisor, and they don't take our advice. Well, they don't take our advice. I think that speaks to the weakness of the current office, that if in fact you're that cavalier about, well, if they don't take our advice, you're there to protect not them, but the city. And so if you've got difficulties with people not listening to you, then I would suggest that you need to revise what it is that, how you interact with people. And to me, the cornerstone of that is you've got to do some basic training up front with the elected officials about what the role of the city attorney is and what their obligations are under certain public laws. And then you go from there. Certainly, when a city attorney does give counsel, much of that is done in an attorney client privilege where it can't be disclosed about what was actually said. But you kind of look at the outcomes that we've been seeing lately in the city. I think that raises the question about what kind of advice was given.
If you're watching this, if you are someone who has like some concerns about police reform, uh,
Mhm.
uh, Schipske is definitely a candidate you should be looking at and listening to some of her conversation about how our city attorney can be involved in those different processes. So please, when you, for folks that are out there and this is your first time learning anything about a city attorney, I
Right.
implore you to just check out Gerrie. And also, if you go to your Gerrie's website, let me pull this up. I was on your website this morning.
Mhm.
She actually talks about, she posts the information about what the role is of a city attorney is. So if you want to learn more about that, check out her page. One thing that I have learned about you, Gerrie, is you're always educating people. You're always educating people. You're always giving people information. You're always providing resources for us to be able to go and look for ourselves. And you know, and something that just came to mind that I should have done this at the opening. Because also a reason why I'm familiar with you is through Mr. Bill Pearl of the Long Beach
Yes.
Report.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that, and I'm just going to say this, I know I should have said this when I opened it. I'm doing today's series in honor of Mr. Bill Pearl,
Thank
because
you.
Mr. Bill Pearl was definitely about open information and transparency. And he always was making sure that what you were sharing was shared with the general public. So
Exactly.
for those of you who are not familiar, Mr. Bill Pearl was definitely a staple in our community as far as information, making sure that the residents of this city was informed about what is going on, and actually an inspiration to me and being able to use my
Mhm.
voice. So Jerry, I'm going to come back to the conversation of Bill before we end, because I have some questions that I want to ask you
Well,
about Mr.
can I
Pearl.
mention, you mentioned earlier that I had started out running for mayor, and I did because I really saw a gap in leadership in the city, and I saw things that really need to be addressed. But as I did that, more and more people came to me and said, the things that need to be fixed by a city attorney. And Bill said to me, and he and I stayed in contact up till the end. Bill said to me, he always called me councilwoman. He said, "Councilwoman, you need to run for city attorney. You shouldn't run for mayor." And so I looked long and hard at that. And then when I saw that only one person had filed, I thought, whoa, wait a minute. This is not right in a democracy, because that means we would have no discussion of the issues surrounding city attorney, because that person would be automatically appointed on June 8th if nobody ran. And so his wife the other day reminded me, she said, Bill would be so excited about what you're doing, and so excited also about, the information that you're trying to get out there about making the city more open and transparent. So I appreciate that you acknowledge him.
Yes, this he stays in my mind a lot lately,
Yeah.
and I'm like, we need Mr. Pearl.
Yes,
So
we do.
Measure M. Um, can you talk? Can you tell people what Measure M is, and
Sure.
tell them about what has recently happened in
Yeah.
regards to Measure M?
Well, it actually began before Measure M. The city decided that it needed money, as it always thinks it needs money. It doesn't reduce its expenditures, but it always needs money. So it decided to put a fee on our own city pipelines. And I said, that's not legal. You cannot do that. And so when they first started out, it was $1 million a year, and then it was passed on to the water ratepayers in their rates. And so I assembled a legal team, and we filed legal action. And the city basically said, okay, you're right. And so they stopped a 12 million transfer. But the reason we found out that they stopped so easily, not only maybe they finally realized it was illegal, but they had this thing called Measure M in their back pocket, where they thought, well, you know what we could do? We could ask the voters to approve up to a 12% surcharge on their own water rates. And then that money would be transferred into the city general fund. And we'll tell everybody, said the city, that is for police and, the same things they promise over and over again: police and fire and infrastructure. And life will be much better if we can do this. So unfortunately, this many of the city council members put out flyers, and so did the mayor, and brochures that said, first of all, this is not a tax. Secondly, it's only on surplus funds. And thirdly, it's not going to raise your rates. Well, the same legal team that won on the pipeline issue we filed action, and we won at the trial court. And the trial court said, "Oh, wait a minute, this is a tax." It was not on surplus because it allowed the water department to raise the rates to pay for the 12% surcharge, and the rates did go up. And so we won at the trial level, and the city should have stopped immediately, stopped transferring, stopped the surcharge. But oh no, they thought, oh, then we'll win at the appellate level, which is the next level. And we won there as well. And then they said, oh, no, no, we're going to keep doing this, transferring, until we absolutely get an opinion from the California Supreme Court. Well, the California Supreme Court looked at the case and said, we're not going to review it. We're going to let it stand the way it is. So consequently, the city of Long Beach has got to stop putting a 12% surcharge on water because it's unconstitutional. Our state constitution, because of Prop 218 and Prop 26, say that you cannot assess water for other things than water. And you can't just put a surcharge on it and throw it over into your general fund. It has to be used for water related services, and it wasn't being. The city also then has to refund to the ratepayers I think it's about 30.8 million that they took. And so that's what that's all about. And again, they didn't have to go that far. They could have stopped it at any level. They could have mitigated their damages. They didn't. They just took it all the way to the end. And consequently, they have to give the money back, which, by the way, belongs to the ratepayers. It's not like it was city money that's being taken now and has to be given. They took it, and they took it illegally.
If you were, had you been the city attorney, what would you have done differently? Because I mean, I'm in. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming that this was something that actually went through the office of the city attorney before it became reality.
Yeah, city attorney, in addition to being the sole legal advisor, has to approve ballot language. And so the city attorney approved Measure M. And I guess I guess I would, from the get-go, I would have looked at it differently and said, wait a minute, it's very clear. 218 and 26 have always said you cannot assess on water for anything that's not related to water. So that's not what this was all about. This was about to fill the general coffers. And then more importantly, then when they lost at trial, I would have come into the city council and say, listen, this is the basis by which we lost. It is not likely that the appellate court will find any errors in law. And that's usually the only reason the appellate court will overturn something. And therefore, I would advise that we mitigate our losses right now. We stop the transfer and we stop the surcharge, and we figure out how best we can mitigate it. But they just continued to go on.
Question. So prior to you becoming a city council member, what did you do? Like, what was your day job?
Oh, I've been an attorney for over 32 years, and I've worked at every level of government as well in the private sector. I was, for instance, general counsel for the Teachers Association of Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
I was senior vice president of operations, which was in the legal department for Med Partners, because I have a healthcare background as well. And I taught law at Cal State Long Beach. I taught healthcare law and ethics for about 6 years. And I was over there for a total of 11 years. And directly right before I decided to run for this, I worked for Community Legal Aid in Orange County and as a healthcare access attorney. And I won many cases at the state and federal hearing levels, where I represented individuals who were critically ill, who had lost their healthcare benefits, who couldn't get what they needed to be able to live. A lot of kids who had autism and were unable to get the services that they are legally entitled to get. I just down the list of people that's just incredible. It was an incredibly satisfying job because it really made differences in people's lives. I'm also, in addition to being an attorney, I'm a registered nurse practitioner. And I've been a registered nurse practitioner longer than I've been an attorney. So this is about 39 years as a nurse, and then about 32 years as an attorney. And I combined the two. And so that's why the community legal aid position was incredible. I've had my own law practice. I've done malpractice consulting. And the state Senate Rules Committee placed me on the Medical Board of California. I was on there for 9 years.
Wow.
I was the first nurse ever to be on the doctor's board, as they call it. And they elected me vice president of the board. And on that board, we reviewed and actually adjudicated discipline against physicians. And so I have reviewed thousands and thousands of negligence complaints and other wrongdoing, that licensed physicians have done. So I've got a really good background across the board. And more importantly, I worked in the city of Long Beach before I became an attorney. And I worked as the city's first public information officer in the city manager's office, and then went on to work in financial management. And I was the head of the commercial services bureau, which is gas, water, and refuge. So I know the inside of Long Beach. And being not only a staff person on the city manager's team, I then went on and became a city council person. So I have an
Wow.
advantage that other people don't have as a city attorney, because I work both sides. And so I will know as a city attorney the sensitivities of what an elected official faces. And actually the difficulties of being a part-time council person are
Okay.
not really having the full grasp of what is going on. And that is why it's so important that they be given reliable legal information.
Wow. Um, so I do see a question for you in the comments. I'm going to ask that in just a moment. Yet one more thing that I have a question about, and a few weeks ago, let me pull up my source. A few weeks ago, um, yes, the Long Beach Post ran an article, and the title of it reads, Long Beach says it will find 3 candidates for campaign finance violations. You happen to be one of those candidates. So, and it was interesting because I've been doing my series, All Politricks Are Local. The
Yeah,
night before that went out, I had actually downloaded the finances, and I had seen the couple of finances that I had downloaded were yours, um, Dan Miles is
yeah,
running for
man.
city auditor, and one other person, which I can't remember right now, but
Nick
all of
Liddy.
you had
Oh,
given yourselves some type of loan, right?
right.
And I had was trying to gather some information so that I could learn about it. And the next day I see this article.
Yeah.
What was that all about? Because I saw that it's been kind of dismissed in a sense. So tell people what was really going on there.
Well, from a political standpoint, it was a way that they were looking to get a headline that they could use on what's called a hit piece, where they could say, Schipke running for city attorney, but violates law, and we didn't violate the law. I've been around politics for a long time and have had to sign campaign finance reports. What happened on all of us, and by the way, the treasurer for my opponent was the most outspoken against what the city had done, because he is the president of the California Political Treasurers
Which
Association. And
which
he said,
who was that?
David Gould.
I had an opportunity to manage someone's campaign years ago,
Yes,
and Mr. Gould is the first person that treasurer that I had ever met, and I've referred folks to him since then.
right.
He used to meet me at the Starbucks.
Yeah, no, and
He got
he
off the train at the Metro.
right. He did all my campaigns, but because he was doing my mayor campaign, but because he represented my opponent who had filed before I had for city attorney, he said, I can't do this. And so I had someone else who actually had worked for him. And, what occurred was a clerical error. And I got this nasty, nasty letter, threatening letter, about 4:30 in the afternoon on Cinco de Mayo. And I remember Cinco de Mayo because I was supposed to go to an event. And it said, you've done you illegally loaned yourself in excess of 15,000, and we're going to send this to the district attorney for criminal prosecution, and we're going to sue you for 3 times the amount, and go on and on. So I immediately called my attorney, who is Fred Wuscher. And Fred is the best, he's the preeminent election attorney in California. And he said that letter is off base. And David said the same thing publicly, as well as my treasurer. We corrected what the mistake was, and that was my treasurer had put what I had given her to go into both a loan and a contribution. She'd put it all into a loan. And so she went back in and she could, and I will tell you, for anyone who doesn't, really trust anyone, if you look at these campaign finance reports, there's a box at the top that says amended report. Mm-hmm. And the reason it says amended report is this happens frequently. Something's not correct, and you're supposed to be given the opportunity to amend it. And that's what we did. We had an amended report filed back with the city within 2 hours. Yes, they did make a referral to the district attorney, and all of us, I believe, got a letter back from the district attorney saying he's not going to prosecute, and that if there is a concern, it can be referred to the FPPC, which is the Fair Political Practices Committee. So I'm not blaming my treasurer, because I took responsibility, and I'm not going to throw her under the bus, and said, look, the mistake was made. It's been corrected. Of course, we know what the law is. And all the candidates are working with really experienced treasurers, and it happens. And that's exactly what David Gould told the press, is that clerical mistakes happen, they get corrected, and you don't threaten to send somebody to a criminal prosecution because there was no crime.
Yeah, what I read, that it was the possibility that you would be fined $105,000 and somebody was going to be fined $37,000. I'm like, okay, really interesting. I was like, I've seen some other hanky-panky stuff going on in some of these campaign finances, and that people are not looking at because they don't think the candidates are viable enough. But my thing is, if everybody has to do it decent in order, everybody needs to be doing it decent in order. So if
right, and I'm not making light of it. I think what the city attorney had to do, they had to hire outside counsel. By the way, we have 26 attorneys in the city attorney's office, and one of the things I want to do is public disclosure of how much outside counsel is utilized, because it's not in the city attorney's budget. It goes into the department budgets for where they had represented or used that person. But it was what we call overreach. And it certainly, if the city, and I'm not discounting, their threat, if they continue and they pursue this as a civil action, I have an attorney and will respond.
Well, you are an attorney and you know the laws.
Well, that's what Jerlene, that's what they were trying to do. They're trying to make an issue, because with the exception of Dan, the other two candidates they went after. They went after 4 and dropped one of them. They're all attorneys, and we're all running for very visible positions in the city against incumbents or semi-incumbents. And that was what this was all about. And it's unfortunate.
Or selected by the current
Or selected by, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a question. I'm going to pull it up. And it says, do you think the city attorney has a conflict by also representing the port?
Hi, Tonya. That's an interesting question, because the port is supposed to be distinct in some respects, but at the same hand, the city attorney treats it as a entity of the city. I think, quite honestly, it depends on the issue, whether or not that would be a conflict. And those are some of the things I think we need to start looking at and talking about. I think it's just been the way it's always been. But I do think that there is some room in looking at every single department by which the city attorney represents. And by the way, the Port of Long Beach probably pays more in legal than any other city department. I think where there is a conflict, and I don't know if Tonya would agree with me on that, is the city attorney advises the CPPC, the Citizens Complaint Commission, and yet then has to defend the city when misconduct charges our suit on. And so we need to figure that one out. We're one of the
Okay.
few cities that has this kind of strange relationship. And I will tell you, when going over and reading the reconciliation plan that the city put out there, the number one complaint from the public is this supposed conflict of interest between the city attorney and the Citizens Complaint Commission. It's not independent, which is, and I will make another point on that. This is why I called out my opponent for taking money from the Long Beach Police Officers Association and taking their endorsement, and they've done independent expenditures. I haven't seen anything yet from them on her, but that's kind of a conflict of interest. Here you are saying that you want the public trust that what you do is in the best interest of the city, and then in fact what you find out is that that person's taken money. And there's a movement in California, and this regards prosecutors right now, but that the prosecutor candidates should not be taking any money from police as well. We just need to have a firewall between the city attorney and any of the organizations that the city attorney has to defend the city for.
Well, folks who are listening, and for those of us who were actively involved in that framework for reconciliation and its recommendations, uh, if Miss Gerrie Schipske wins, we need to make sure we hold her accountable to ensure that the attorney is not advising the CPCC. So I'm putting that out there right
We've got
now.
to figure out a way with the city council to structure that. I would wish at some point we could have an independent commission,
Mhm.
um, independent certainly of the city manager. But what I'm concerned about is, how do you get independence when you inevitably have political officials appointing people to these commissions, and they in fact then have taken special interest money as well.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm looking at my notes. All right, well, we're gonna wrap this up. This is I'm excited. I'm thinking of all the other questions that I can ask, but I
Well,
know we
please
do.
send me, anybody who wants to send me questions, you can send it to Gerrie at Schipske number 4lb.com.
Mhm.
And I answer everybody's email.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up her website. If you've been watching, I want to say thank you. But actually, before I close out, I'm gonna pull something else up while I still have Gerrie here. Let's see, give me just a moment. I don't know if you are able to see that. Remember, ballot voting centers open. I'm actually going to post this on my Facebook page so that people are able to see this. But it shows where you can go and vote. Please make sure you vote, whether you drop it in the mail or you drop it in a voter box or you show up at a voting center. So,
Can you tell people quickly too? The ballot is a bit confusing because it's 8 pages. You've got to make certain that you turn over each page, and they have intermixed, state, national, and then the city, and it's not quite clear, I think, to some people, and then judges, that we're kind of wedged in the middle of all of this, meaning city elections. So. I know it's time consuming, but if you could take that time and go through that. And also, you've received a pamphlet. And quickly, I want to tell you about that pamphlet where you have a ballot statement. What is not disclosed in that ballot statement is that I had to pay $6,300 for 200 words. And I think there's an assumption when candidates do not put a statement that somehow they weren't interested, and that's not the case. We had to pay out of pocket before we could even file if we wanted a ballot statement. So try to read those, and then when you go to your ballot, you've got some reference material.
woohoo! Ballot statement. You can find it in your sample, or you can find it actually in your little booklet that you received
Right.
to do your voting. So I just had a discussion with Gerrie Schipske, candidate for the Long Beach City Attorney position, um, nurse practitioner, attorney, author. She has
Grandmother.
authored.
Grandmother.
Grandmother, the most important role, grandmother. She has authored 7 books, people, 7 books. You can find her books in Costco, Barnes and Nobles, CVS, the place that I don't mention that to start with an A. They can get her, you can get her books from there as well. And someone said even the local Walgreens, you can find her books.
Yeah.
Gerrie, thank you so much
You're welcome.
for joining us today. Um, your tagline is "We know her, we trust her." Hopefully, you got an opportunity to get to know her today. As she shared, she is accessible to anyone who wants to connect with her, reach out to her, have a chat with her. There's only a few days left, folks. And one
Right.
thing that's very important about this race that she is in, winner takes all. There will not be a runoff.
Right.
So don't say I'll wait until after the primary to cast my vote. So you have to select someone this go round because they're winner takes all. So just remember that winner takes all in this race. Gerrie, before we sign off, is there anything that you would like to share with viewers, or what makes you different than your opponent? Whatever it is, you got a minute. Go ahead. It's all yours.
Well, the future of the city is at stake, and that I'm not saying that lightly or as a politician. It truly is. We really need to make some serious changes in Long Beach concerning how we need to be open and transparent and accountable. That has been the cornerstone of my public service, but it's also been the cornerstone of this campaign. And I'm the only candidate for city attorney that's focusing on this issue as well as fiscal responsibility. I'm getting the city attorney's department in line in terms of the how much it's spent. And by the way, our city attorney has one of the highest salaries of any elected official in California. And I'm going to roll
Wow.
back that salary. It's 319,000. I'm going to roll it back and use the difference between that and what our elected officials make. To start a neighborhood legal core program where we can place an attorney and a law student within all sectors of the city to help the community organizations with the quality of life issues that they face that they don't feel are being taken care of. And it's worked extremely well in Oakland. It can work extremely well in Long Beach, and we can see some real differences here.
Well, thank you, Gerrie.
Welcome.
Folks that are watching is Jerlene, Talk of the Town, still having a conversation about all politics are local. I'm a mama with a voice, not afraid to use it. If you are watching this, if you're watching it now, give me a thumbs up. You're watching it later, thumbs up. Please share, please
Yeah.
react, please comment. Um, if you're watching this after the fact, put replay so we know that you're here. Again, appreciate folks that took the time out of their day or to watch it whenever you decide to watch this. Um, thank you, Gerrie, and I'm
Thank
going
you.
to log us off. Don't leave the studio.
Thumbs up.